Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. And in this particular video, I want to talk about campaign customization and why Creative Assembly should add it to the base game. Just like they did with Pharaoh, keeping in mind this is not something that can't be done. In fact, I imagine it could be done very easily because there's already mods that do it, and apparently, based on what I've read on the subject, changing a lot of the things I'm going to talk about in this video is not really a complicated task at all. So let's talk about campaign customization, and I'm going to use the campaign configuration tool as an idea of some of the things that Creative Assembly could add, though keep in mind there's also other things that CA could add in the game beyond this, like things like campaign movement, range, unit recruit rank, all that. So first off, let's focus on economy. In this particular campaign, I've reduced the upkeep cost by minus 50% for both myself and the AI. I've reduced the building cost by 50%. I've given both myself and the AI a background income increase of 2,500. On top of that, I've also increased the growth by a fairly substantial level, and I've also increased the Legendary Lord instant rank, the generic lord rank, and the hero rank by quite a bit. 14 for legendary lords, 12 for heroes and generic lords. And that is about it. Also, I've increased the research rate by 300%. You can also go for many other things like instant research, alt text, all that. Now, what this has done in this particular campaign is that it has genuinely made this campaign as the ogres, as Greece's Goldtooth, though keep in mind I'm also playing with the Ogrehaul mod. But what this has done inherently is that it's made the campaign a heck of a lot more interesting. And this is just turn 15. What I have achieved in this campaign from the perspective of territory that I've conquered, because I've dealt with the Sons of the Mountain, I've dealt with Carcassonne, I took Firemouth and Bloodspeak and then traded it away to my allies over here, who I'm hoping to confederate sooner rather than later. But all that I've done here, defeating Gorse, defeating Kugaf, is something you can do in the baseline game. But here's the thing. The journey there has been a heck of a lot more interesting. I've had far more interesting and compelling battles in this campaign because I've been able to access units much easier. I'm also using the Warband upgrade mod for all factions, which also adds extra unit diversity in a campaign. Whether or not that's something CA should add in the game, at least as an option, that's a different discussion. Maybe they should, right? But even if it just remains a mod. The point is that the battles I fought, for starters, have actually been generally more challenging than the base game, because dealing with Kugaf at low rank when he has just Nurglings is one thing. Dealing with high level Kugaf is a different affair. And dealing with Gorst when he just has zombies is one thing. Dealing with him when he has freaking Blood Knights and Black Knights with Barding, Lance and Barding, Vargulfs and all that, and high ranking lords is a far more interesting situation. You probably will win. In fact, you'll probably win in an easier fashion. But the crucial point is that you're adding a lot more diversity and a lot more interesting things happening in a campaign. And on top of that, because I have the economic benefit, and so does the AI, what I'm seeing on this campaign map is freaking extraordinary. Because while the early game has been easy, I can't say the mid game is necessarily going to be easy. And I'm actually looking forward to the mid game in this particular campaign, which, you know, I would consider the mid game like something like past turn 20. Because things are going to be pretty crazy. I mean, let's just look at this map and what's been going on. Keeping in mind, you probably would need a better computer or a decent computer to be able to achieve this. Though DDR5 RAM actually does produce a great deal of performance increases. So I think that would actually be more important than having a top-of-the-line CPU. You don't necessarily need the best CPU in the world or even the best memory, but just DDR5 RAM with, you know, low latency or overclocked by reasonable amount, which is what I've done, can actually deliver that. So let's look at Cathay. Look at Xiao Ming. He's got multiple armies, 4 stacks of troops, building a 5th stack, But he's got ogres coming for him in Shangyang over there because he is at war with the Mountain Eaters over here. He's got 2 stacks over there. He's got 2 stacks under Lokir. He's got several stacks under Snitch. And oh boy, is this an exciting event. Like there's 5 freaking armies, 6 armies over here in this situation. And Xiao Ming has to deal with them. Now, if we look at the units he's recruiting, he's got a bunch of higher-end units. He's got artillery. He's got Iron Hail Gunners. Suffice to say, if I was playing as Lokir or Snitch, dealing with Cafe in this situation would be a drastically different proposal than in a regular campaign. And even fighting them is a drastically different proposal in the base game. Now, Xiao Ming does still have his original units. He hasn't really gotten anything except Jade Warriors, but once he loses that army, he is going to have a lot more diversity and a lot more power. Then if we look at Miao Yang over here, she also has a lot more diversity because she's been able to get Nan Gao to tier 4, and she's also getting Po Mei to tier 4. So you can imagine she also has a bunch of tier 3, tier 4 units. Village? Whew. The Warriors of Chaos actually being more of a challenge than just simply having 1 powerful army. Imagine if they had 6 powerful armies or 4 powerful armies, because that's one of the problems of Warriors of Chaos or a lot of factions. They might get 1 good or 2 good powerful armies, but once you defeat them, it's game over. But here, because they can recruit more, faster, and higher tier units with higher level lords and heroes to lead those armies, they are a very different beast to deal with. Or if you want to see the ultimate expression of this, just what's happening over here between Client Rectus and Drazif, who are fighting each other, is something else. Holy crap. It's like, you look at the biblical hordes of Skaven, this is the true Skaven horde. Tretch is actually the most powerful Skaven faction in the game right now, in terms of number of armies, but what's going on here? Holy crap. This is proving to be quite interesting. I'm really curious to see who's going to win. And all of this is just through economic modifiers to allow myself and AI to maintain a lot more armies. The way you gotta trick the AI is basically I had to reduce their upkeep more or less to not quite 0, but very, very close to 0. And that was what has been pushing all that's been going on in this campaign. And it's not just in the nearby areas. No. This is Vlad and Elspeth are about to have the biblical showdown. It's like dealing with endgame armies from the beginning of a campaign. Interestingly enough, at least on my computer, it's not creating as much lag as you might think. Surprisingly, it's actually even creating less lag than the endgame, the ultimate endgame crisis, even though there's actually a lot more armies in this campaign than there are in the ultimate endgame crisis. That's saying something perhaps about the scripting of the endgame crisis or the ultimate endgame crisis. But suffice to say, there is a lot happening on this campaign map, like a huge freaking amount. Like the hordes of the old world have been unleashed and there is only war. This, to me, is how a campaign in Total War Warhammer should feel like massive armies across the land sweeping all that stand before them. Skarbrand actually having 4 freaking stacks, maybe even 5 stacks of troops that he's throwing against his enemies producing numerous armies in their own right. It can and has lent itself to creating a far more dynamic and interesting campaign situation. And look, what's the great thing about choice with campaign customization is you don't have to give yourself the same level of strength as they are. You can customize with this mod different factions, right? You can give certain factions more strength, certain races more strength than others, and really lend itself to a great campaign situation. And because of the situation we're having here, I can't just like, oh, I'm going to show up with the 1 stack against Emmerich and defeat him. If I try and do that, I'll probably get my ass handed to me, because Emmerich has 3 freaking stacks defending his capital, and he's going to be able to produce a lot more. Even the ogres that I've dealt with, they still have an army over here. It's not the most powerful army, but even with all the cheats, I still have a limitation on how much I can afford. I actually have to be a lot more careful than I am in the base game. in quite a lot of ways. Because, as I said, in the base game, it comes down to 1, 2 armies that you defeat of an enemy faction. Here, you might be dealing with 4, 5, 6 armies, and they'll replenish those armies very, very quickly. You can consider this spammy nonsense, but it does force you to play a campaign in a much more interesting way and makes things a lot more dynamic. You actually have a level of risk in this campaign that you don't have in the base game. Like, for instance, over here, the Sons of the Mountain declared war on Kugaf when I was least prepared for it. I won, but geez, could you have picked a different moment? It would have been appreciated. What can I say on that? So those are some of the things I think Creative Assembly could add, and it would be relatively simple to add. Also, we could talk about things like campaign movement range, things like unit recruitment rank, all those kind of things, or maybe scalable difficulty in a campaign. Like, you start the campaign at a certain level, but as you progress through the campaign, more and more bonuses are unlocked for you and AI to lead to a more dynamic campaign experience, especially in the late game, which is one of the problems right now, because the late game feels boring. Partly because the AI can't keep up with you. Well, over here, they've been keeping up with me from turn 1. They have high-end units that they're able to throw against me, and that's a lot more interesting to deal with than, just dealing with a bunch of clan rats when you're at turn 60. Now, of course, all of this, and just to say this before I wrap this up, there are going to be issues using these kind of settings, beyond the obvious problems that they can cause in terms of campaign performance, though I think it's manageable, really, a lot more manageable than some people might believe. But the bigger issue is you might get a huge amount of battle fatigue, because with this insane level of armies on the campaign map, yeah, you're going to have a lot more battles on your hands. But this is where the ability of changing the Autoresolve would really be useful. Now, you might say, well, there are ways of changing the Autoresolve in the base game. You just have to go and change battle difficulty, because that does affect the Autoresolve result. But here's the problem with that, or several problems with that. One, changing the battle difficulty, of course, changes AI tactics. So if you change battle difficulty, you set it lower, the AI is just going to perform in a worse way. Sometimes it can be better. If you lower the difficulty, they actually will use better tactics, or it will suit them better. But by and large, the AI is more competent on higher difficulties, as you might expect. We can neutralize the stats benefit, and I think that's a much better experience overall. But in terms of the battle difficulty affecting the Autoresolve result, I think that's not a great thing. But here's the problem. On top of that, when you're tying battle difficulty and Autoresolve to the same thing, right? Battle tactics. The AI behavior on the campaign map, how aggressive it is, how much territory it's taking, what kind of risks it's taking, that has changed. So the AI is a lot more passive on lower difficulties than it is on higher battle difficulties. And I think just tying all of that to the same meter is not great. And even then, I personally get better results fighting battles manually than even if I set this to easy. I won't over here, because I don't want my campaign to be affected, because it does get affected. You set this thing to easy, and then you swap it back to very hard, you might think, oh, it's not going to cause problems. It does cause problems. Again, just instant effect. And it takes a couple of turns at the very least until the AI gets over it. So not an ideal scenario in a lot of ways, because we do want AI to go out there and do something. So I think just tying battle tactics, campaign aggressiveness, and Autoresolve to the same freaking option is not great. So I would separate those. On top of that, every settlement, minor settlement, major settlements get an Autoresolve benefit, which is not at all reflective of sieges. So I think having a separate Autoresolve meter that could range from pretty much winning every battle in Autoresolve regardless of how outlandish the outcome is, or losing very few of them, to having to fight every battle manually, that would be a better situation from my perspective, and separate from battle tactics and AI aggressiveness. Maybe AI aggressiveness should be its own meter, and actual battle tactics its own meter, and Autoresolve its own thing. That would be a great thing. And with respect to sieges, there are mods that turn off sieges. So I use modifiers that give me an advantage in Autoresolve, so I can keep the AI aggressiveness. But CA could change this. Again, we're not talking here very complicated stuff. But then there's mods that remove all sieges, all minor settlement battles, all siege battles from the game, and you just fight field battles, which are the most interesting battles in the game as a whole. you still have garrisons to deal with, and you can have some very significant battles. By the way, speaking about modifying campaigns, I've increased the unit scale in this particular campaign, so you might have noticed like there's 180, Jade Warrior crossbow. So I've gone with true size, which doubles the size of units, and also gives HP to single entities to, compensate for that to some extent. It's not perfect balance, but, just higher unit scale, unit scale which the game inherently has is probably never going to be perfectly balanced, but it's certainly a much better situation. Like, again, larger scale battles, depends on your computer, depends on what you can handle, but there's a lot of things the current engine can support and CA could add easily in the game to make for just a more enjoyable campaign experience, especially if you've played the campaign multiple times and you just want something else than what you're used to. That would be the real benefit in all of this. That's all I had to say. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Stay tuned for more.